It was a crisp spring day, rather early in the season when ElderMother sent out an invitation to Warren Hill. Blinky, the Owl of Jellicles Farm, swooped low to drop the rolled-up giant magnolia leaf scroll. It was actually several dried leaves stitched together, and the words were etched neatly to say, "To my dearest band of bunnies, please drop by for afternoon tea a day past this coming full moon. Affectionately yours, ElderMother. P.S. Come. Signed, Ginger." The scroll leaf paper unfurled after Blinky dropped it and right over Shi-Shi Rabbit's head. He was busy polishing his peach pit collection. "DanDan, BaoBao! It's Blinky again!" Shi-Shi squealed and started giggling. The owl scowled. He didn't like being called that, as his real name was Ainsley Phinneas, the third. He felt like the other creatures mocked him. "Next time I will drop something else on these oversized fuzzy rodents," the owl muttered to himself. "Now you know that it's not respectful. The owl is only nice to us because ElderMother has her rules for our protection," BaoBao said softly. He was the eldest and the most responsible. "We have been invited for tea." DanDan whipped up the calendar to check for the date. "The day after the full moon, and that means we only have 6 days more." "What's a tea?" Shi-Shi asked. He was the youngest and has never been invited anywhere before. "We will all dress up nice-like," DanDan said and hopped around the soft grassy floor. "And there will be hot tea and sweets, warm tarts and soft cakes. We can floof around the fireplace and ElderMother will give us gifts." DanDan did a little dance and sat on his fluffy white tail. Shi-Shi liked the sound of this and clapped his paws with gusto. BaoBao shook his head and his brows knitted together. "That's not all. What did you forget, DanDan?" BaoBao asked sternly and turned his gaze to Shi-Shi. He was a kind rabbit and can never get mad, even when the younger bunnies made a mess or didn't do their beds or forgot to shut the windows on cold winter nights. "Shi-Shi, when we are invited to a tea party, we must also take the time to clean up squeaky well and look nice for ElderMother. It is polite to present her with a gift. We must be on time and be well behaved. And that means no breaking bowls or spilling tea or making loud slurpy noises," DanDan yelled to Shi-Shi from the other end of the room. He was rummaging for nail trimmers. He wanted his paws to look nice for ElderMother. Shi-Shi nodded. He had this feeling that this was an important moment and that it was special to be invited to ElderMother's cottage. He opened the invitation scroll carefully. "What is this smudge?" he asked BaoBao. Almost at once he added hurriedly, "I didn't do it." Shi-Shi was tiny and can be messy. He is learning, but he was sure he didn't plant that ugly black smudge at the bottom of the paper scroll. DanDan came running to peer over BaoBao's shoulder, and there it was. An odd-shaped smudge at the very bottom edge. "Oh, that's Ginger." "What's a ginger?" Shi-Shi was curious. BaoBao sighed. "Ginger is a cat. You will see." The young rabbit had so much to learn. "Well, this Ginger is messy," Shi-Shi declared dismissively and tore down the hall to race DanDan to the door. They still had 6 more days for the tea party and it was playtime now. 6 days later, at around 3 hours in the afternoon, 3 immaculately dressed rabbits marched in their best suits to ElderMother's cottage by the gurgling creek that bordered Jellicles Farm. The door flew open after the 3rd knock. "Hello, bunnies. You made it on time." ElderMother stood in the middle of the cottage, which seemed much more spacious inside. The whole room was aglow with warmth. It seemed to be coming not just from the fireplace, but also from the copper cauldron in the corner. Bunches of dried flower bouquets hung from the roof beams, and candlesticks seemed to be floating around. By her side was an orange-gold cat, with the most regal bearing. His whiskers were white and fine. His tail was furry and fat, his eyes were green flecked with gold, and they seemed to pierce the fragrant wall of air between them. "Welcome, BaoBao, DanDan, and Shi-Shi," ElderMother beamed. Her voice was like velvet and yet was also strong, like steel. She was standing straight with her hands clasped, her delicate wrinkled fingers interlocked with a silent strength. It seemed to Shi-Shi that she was like a force that was unshakable. BaoBao stepped forward and stuck out his groomed paw. ElderMother guffawed and hugged him tight. BaoBao blushed and gave his gift, a potted crocus plant. It was a rare plant that had precious yellow stamen called saffron that people from the east prized. DanDan was next, and he gave her a decorative gourd he had been working on since fall. He had dried it out, polished its ridges and scooped its hollow insides. Then he painted it yellow and blue with intricate designs. It was a beautiful vase that seemed to glow now inside the cottage. Shi-Shi was very shy as he handed ElderMother his gift. It was a chunk of honeycomb he had got from the bees in exchange for fertilizing and tending their nectar flower patch all last summer. ElderMother thanked them all profusely and introduced Ginger to them. Ginger grunted and walked away to perch upon the fireplace mantel. Shi-Shi wanted to follow him, but DanDan stopped him. He didn't like Ginger. DanDan thought he was a rude cat. Minutes passed to become hours, and the cottage was filled with stories, songs and laughter as the rabbits narrated the year's best tidbits to ElderMother. They helped themselves to lemon balm tea and lavender shortbread. The table was heaving with rosemary pound cake, walnut honey brownies and rose petal jam. There were berries of every size and colour. They looked like little jewels and tasted so sweet. After what seemed like a long, long time, ElderMother stood up and announced, "Well, my favourite band of bunnies, it's time for you to leave, and I have your gift here." Shi-Shi almost clapped his paws, but BaoBao nudged him sharply and stared at him. DanDan discreetly loosened the button over his now plump belly and sat straight. ElderMother presented a little pink basket. It was overflowing with white lace and little sprigs of lavender embroidered at the edges. "Your gift. I give you May." All three bunnies peer inside the basket. ElderMother then addressed BaoBao. "She is now going to be the most important responsibility in your life." The next moment there was a loud wail and frightened shriek. Even Ginger was jolted from his slumber. It was Shi-Shi. His face was pale and his fine hair stood out like little prickles on an angry hedgehog. DanDan didn't know if he was angry or frightened. Shi-Shi stopped shrieking, turned on his heel and darted off like an arrow. Stunned, BaoBao and DanDan looked at ElderMother, whose face was expressionless, and her mouth has now become a thin line. "This isn't good. This isn't good at all," she said. Ginger, now fully awake, nodded as though in agreement. Back at Warren Hill, several hours later, Shi-Shi was still locked in his room. DanDan was worried and kept calling out to him through his burrow door. "Shi-Shi, come on out now." DanDan tried to restrain his voice. BaoBao glared at him and Shi-Shi's burrow door from the other end of the room. "You will wake her up," BaoBao hissed, and his long, floppy ears seemed to rise a little, as though pointing to the basket where baby bunny May was sleeping. DanDan sighed and crumpled against the door. Suddenly, without any warning, the door swung open and DanDan fell on his back with a thump. He swallowed his annoyance, and when he opened his eyes, he saw a worried Shi-Shi staring at him upside down. "Ah!" DanDan whimpered as he grabbed Shi-Shi's paw that was brown with orange splotches. Shi-Shi was a multi-hued bunny rabbit. Shi-Shi helped DanDan and then whispered conspiratorially, "Look inside, but not right away. I have packed all the things we need. midnight, you and I, let's run away." DanDan gasped. "I can hear you!" A voice boomed and the two young bunnies huddled together. It was BaoBao. He had heard Shi-Shi's runaway plans. DanDan has never seen BaoBao raise his voice. He was such a gentle creature, and it was not like him at all to get angry. BaoBao grabbed Shi-Shi by his floppy ears. He was gentle that he didn't hurt him, but firm enough so Shi-Shi wouldn't run away. He led him to the middle of Shi-Shi's burrow. There in the middle of the floor was Shi-Shi's runaway bundle. In a little red handkerchief was a pair of binoculars, 2 acorn teacups, a large woolly blankie, and, to BaoBao's secret satisfaction, a pile of books. Shi-Shi had also thoughtfully packed DanDan's sun hat, a medicine kit, and a chunk of honeycomb wrapped in a fig leaf. There were 2 ash branch hiking sticks, with DD and SS scratched near the handles. "So you think you can run away?" BaoBao growled. Shi-Shi hung his head and his tail thumped slowly as his anxiety rose. He was suddenly very ashamed of his behavior. But, Shi-Shi sniffled as a big fat teardrop rolled down and got caught in his whiskers. "You love me and DanDan loves me. Now that this... Shi-Shi's voice got caught in his throat. BaoBao gently stroked Shi-Shi's forehead. That seemed to break the dam of Shi-Shi's feelings, and he fell on his tummy. His limbs sprawled as he pounded the floor. "Now that this hairless, pale pink creature is here, you won't love me anymore? Eeeeee!" Shi-Shi bawled. A stunned BaoBao didn't say anything, but with 3 blinks of the eye, he started laughing out loud, clutching his belly and fell on his back laughing. What a sight it was! 2 bunnies, one on its tummy, throwing a tearful tantrum, and another on its back, clutching its belly to stop laughing. But both of them had to stop when they heard DanDan call out, "You guys, you woke her up!" Just like that, all 3 of them rushed to the table where Mei was rocking her basket, her eyes squeezed shut, and little mewling sounds coming from her toothless, funny mouth. "Oh my! She is ugly," Shi-Shi suggested hopefully. Maybe he was thinking that he could convince the other 2 to give her away. BaoBao turned Shi-Shi's face to him and said in his calmed voice, "But she will be cute, and smart, and funny, and so much fun." "How would you know?" Shi-Shi quipped. His plan seemed to have not worked. "Because this is exactly how you looked too when you came to Warren Hill, when ElderMother gave me you as a gift, and DanDan before you." BaoBao smiled his secret smile. "And look at both of you now." Shi-Shi gasped. It was hard for him to believe that he was as small and pale and fuzzy and with a little rat tail as little Mei was right now. But was he glad that BaoBao took care of him so he could grow up to a strong rabbit with long ears and a plump tail? "Aren't you glad DanDan didn't run away when he saw you?" BaoBao winked and grinned. Shi-Shi blushed and stared at the floor. Suddenly, he didn't feel like running away at all anymore, and now he actually wanted to take care of little Mei. "Maybe she can join us at playtime when she gets bigger," Shi-Shi murmured without looking up. "That she will. Now, off you go with DanDan, and when you come back later, be sure to unpack." BaoBao nodded at DanDan. Shi-Shi and DanDan hopped out to play outdoors until dusk. BaoBao turned to look at Mei, the newest member of his little family. She gurgled as he tickled her, and he rocked her till she fell asleep. From outside, Blinky was watching all this and took off to update ElderMother that all was well at Warren Hill. BaoBao was making carrot soup for little Mei inside. DanDan and Shi-Shi were searching for the perfect little poppy pod to make a bonnet for their littlest sister. And all was well at Jellicles Farm again.